So now we are going to be discussing the desert biome. So desert biomes are typically very dry and can be very, very hot. But other times, deserts can actually be very cold. An example of this would be Antarctica. Some of your textbooks will argue that Antarctica is a desert because it receives very little rainfall. Deserts also typically have little to no plant life and can have very long periods without rain or very long periods of extreme temperature. The average rainfall in a desert is going to be less than 25 centimeters. I'm going to repeat this because it is an insanely low amount of rain. The average yearly rainfall is less than 25 centimeters. The average temperatures in the summer is going to be around 100 degrees Fahrenheit, while the temperatures in the wintertime are going to be an average of 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if we look at the images, such as this picture right here in the back, this is a very good depiction of what a typical desert might look like. It has many different types of cacti, and we can see another image of a cactus right over here, as well as a sand desert right over here in this picture. And in this sand desert, we can see some camels. Camels actually have very unique adaptations that help them live in a sand desert, and we will be talking about that on future slides. We also have a picture of Antarctica right over here with our penguins, and as you can see from this image, there is little to no plant life, as well as this area receives no rainfall. Alrighty, so now let's look at our map to figure out where our deserts are roughly going to be located around the world. So before, on our last presentation about the tropical rainforest, we saw that the tropical rainforest is the biome that falls closest to our equator. It's not going to be the desert, even though some might think that due to the desert's hot temperature. Deserts are actually going to be found around our Tropic of Cancer, which goes across, shown by this dotted line, and it's also going to be shown by our Tropic of Capricorn, which is shown by this dotted line right about here. So it's very important for you guys to know where your Tropic of Cancer and your Tropic of Capricorn are located. They are going to be about 30 to 50 degrees north and south latitude. So remember, latitude is going to run east to west, and longitude is going to run north to south. It is also important to remember that Antarctica over here is going to be our frozen desert. And we also have a very famous desert up here, up in northern Africa. Does anybody know the name of this desert? It's going to be our Sahara Desert. So that's up here in northern Africa. We're also going to have some deserts over here in California and Mexico. There's going to be some down here at the tip of Africa, as well as some over here in central Australia. Alrighty, so we can actually go through these plants pretty quickly for the desert since there aren't too many due to its hot climate. So we have tumbleweeds that can be seen in this biome. We can see some weathered, petrified trees. We're also going to see some black rock, which isn't really a plant, but we wanted to include it. We're also going to have some wildflowers that pop up. And we're also going to have different types of cacti. So some cultures actually eat cacti, and it can be very, very similar to eating a squash in texture. So now that we have made it to the animals slide, I'm going to spend a little bit more time here because some of these organisms that live in a desert biome have very unique adaptations. So first I want to take a look at our camel right over here. I had mentioned camels on a previous slide, and so now I'm going to be talking about some of their adaptations that help them survive in this rather hot, harsh climate. So some of you guys might remember that we went over a camel song over back in Unit 2 when we were learning about adaptations. Originally, some of you might have thought that the camel's hump was full of water, when in fact it is actually filled with fat. It is an energy storage unit for when they need to go very long periods without any food. They also are going to have very soft feet, and this is to help them get traction in the sand. Then they also are going to have very thick lips, and this is to help them when eating tough foods such as cacti. Lastly, they also have really long eyelashes, and this is to help battle against any sand during a windstorm. Next, we have the spadefoot toads. So spadefoot toads actually are going to burrow themselves down in the sand during the day, and they only come out from their burrowing at nighttime. This burrowing in the sand is actually called estivation. Everybody say estivation. So, for an animal to only be active in the nighttime, this is called being nocturnal. So, being nocturnal is when you're only active at night. Many species in a desert are going to only be active at night due to the very hot daytime temperatures. Next, we're going to talk about our kangaroo rats. So kangaroo rats are unique in that they do not actually drink any water. They instead are going to gain their water from the food that they eat. This is a very unique structural adaptation for this organism. We're also going to see some desert tortoises. So the desert tortoise is actually ectothermic, just as our crocodile and alligator were ectothermic. And again, this means that they're cold-blooded and that they regulate their temperature by basking in the sun. Lastly, we're going to have our jackrabbits. So as you can see, our jackrabbits have very large ears. So their ears are unique because it helps them keep homeostasis. So jackrabbits are not actually able to sweat as humans do. So instead, they are going to release body heat through their very large ears. And this is how they're going to maintain their homeostasis. So this video is available for some of you guys to watch. Some of y'all might have watched it before doing this presentation, and that's wonderful. You're already ahead of the game. But some of you might not have watched it yet. So after you take all of your notes and get everything down on your Frere models, make sure to go back and take a look at this desert biome video. So now we have made it to our slide about environmental issues that impact the desert biome. So our first environmental issue that we're going to be talking about is global warming. So global warming is an issue that some people think is very, very important, while others would disagree. Global warming can increase the amount of deserts found on our land. It can cause extreme drought, which could possibly convert grasslands to deserts. We also have impacts caused by off-roading vehicles and other fun extracurriculars that we may partake in. So the vehicles can actually mess up the vegetation and home life of many of our organisms that live in the desert. So just remember this the next time any of you decide to go dune buggying out in the desert. So next we're going to be looking at irrigation. So some of you might have heard about irrigation in social studies before. But when we're going to be talking about irrigation with biomes, it's going to be a little bit different. Irrigation in social studies can typically be seen as a good thing. It means that we are bringing water from one area to another area that doesn't necessarily have a lot of water. But it is important to remember this. We know that energy and matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred or transported. This means that when we remove water, we can actually be creating more deserts. So for every action, there is going to be an equal and opposite reaction. So this means if we are taking water from one location and trying to move it to another, this could actually be creating more deserts in that area where we removed the water from. This is a cause and effect situation. Next, we're going to be talking about grazing animals. So in this picture, our grazing animals are going to be camels, and sometimes they can eat up so much of the vegetation that it leaves the area bare. And so this is what creates more desert with grazing animals. Lastly, we have nuclear waste. So nuclear waste produces a lot of pollution as well as byproduct, and this byproduct and pollution can damage the land and actually continue to increase our amount of deserts. So now we are going to be looking at guess the symbiosis. So you're going to have 3 different scenarios that all take place in a desert biome. So I want you guys to take a few minutes. You can pause the video here and try and figure out what type of symbiosis is occurring. So you have scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3. So go ahead and read through these and try and figure it out on your own. Alright, so looking up here at scenario 1, we can see that this takes place in the Mojave Desert. So what is occurring here is a wasp is laying its eggs on a praying mantis and then killing the praying mantis. So if you said that the symbiotic relationship between the wasp and the praying mantis was a parasitic relationship, you would be correct. So now we are going to be looking at scenario number 2. Now scenario number 2 is occurring between bees and cacti. So the bees are depending on the cacti as a major food source, while the cacti are depending on the bees to pollinate them. So in this situation, the bees and the cacti are both benefiting. So you should have come up with that this is a mutualistic relationship. Lastly, we're going to have our third scenario. So it says, in the desert, the cactus wren will make its nest in the tall cholla cactus to protect its young and offspring from predators. So the cactus is not harmed or helped. So if it's neither harmed nor helped, we know that this is a commensalistic relationship. So hopefully you got all 3 of those symbiotic relationships in our desert biome correct. So now we have finally made it to our Frere model notes, which you all are very familiar with at this point. So remember, this is going to be our desert biome Frere model. It is important for you guys to study all of these facts that we have been putting in our Frere model. You should be taking about 15 minutes every day to look back at your notes to get ready for the test. So remember, for our location, what is most important is to note that the deserts are located near the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. And they are mostly going to be found in North America, Africa, and Australia. Then when you come over to your climate section, it is important to note that the desert biome is extremely hot, but sometimes can be extremely cold. The annual precipitation is going to be less than 25 centimeters per year. This is the lowest of any biome. It's also going to have a temperature of 45 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter and an average of 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. Your flora or plants and your fauna or animals are going to be down in this section, as you all know. So some of those include, for the plants, are cacti, agave, and tumbleweeds. And some of those for your animals are going to be those jackrabbits with the big ears, our spade-footed toads that burrow down in the ground, our kangaroo rats, some lizards, buzzards, and even some camels. So lastly is your interesting facts section, and remember this is very important to know all of these facts. So it's going to have very little biodiversity in this biome. It's also going to have the least amount of rainfall of any biome. This is very, very important that you guys know this. It has extreme temperatures. The animals are typically nocturnal or active at night, and they must be adaptive to live in these extreme scenarios. So just how we talked about with our camels and our jackrabbits, our organisms are going to have to adapt to live in this area. So make sure you get all of these facts down and written on your FRARE model notes before moving on.